My friends, we often pray for God's blessings, asking Him to open doors, to bring healing, to provide, and to lead us into a life of abundance. But what if I told you that before God blesses you, He must prepare you? He must refine you. He must test your faith, not to harm you, but to strengthen you. God does not give great blessings to those who are unprepared to carry them. Throughout history, we see that before God blesses someone, He first takes them through a process of preparation. This preparation is not always easy, and it is often misunderstood. Many people ask for blessings, but are not ready for the responsibility that comes with them. They want the reward without the refining, the victory without the battle, and the harvest without the planting. But God, in His wisdom, knows that a blessing given too soon can become a burden rather than a gift. When we look at the life of David, we see a young shepherd boy anointed as king. Yet he did not step into his throne immediately. Instead, he spent years in the wilderness, facing rejection, danger, and hardship. Why? Because God was preparing him. If David had gone straight from the pasture to the palace without facing trials, he would not have been the strong, wise, and faithful king that Israel needed. His time of preparation was not punishment, it was training. In the same way, before God brings us into a season of blessing, He often leads us through seasons of challenge. Joseph was given dreams of greatness as a young man, yet before those dreams came to pass, he was thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, and unjustly imprisoned. If Joseph had gone straight from his father's house to Pharaoh's palace, he would not have had the wisdom, the humility, or the strength to handle the power God gave him. His years of hardship prepared him for the position of leadership that would not only bless him, but also save entire nations. The preparation was necessary for the blessing to be used correctly. Moses, before leading the Israelites out of Egypt, spent 40 years in the wilderness tending sheep. Paul, before becoming one of the greatest apostles, spent years in solitude and study before he stepped into his calling. Even Jesus himself, before beginning his ministry, spent 40 days fasting in the wilderness. Time and time again, we see this divine pattern. Before God elevates someone, He first prepares them. Many people grow frustrated during the preparation season because it feels like nothing is happening. They pray, they wait, they struggle, and yet the blessing seems distant. But what they do not realize is that every delay is part of the process. God is not ignoring them, He is shaping them. He is teaching patience, strengthening faith, building character, and aligning hearts with His will. The delay is not denial, it is development. When God prepares you, He often removes things that cannot go with you into the next season. He takes away unhealthy attachments, breaks old habits, and closes doors that are not meant for you. It may feel painful, but it is necessary. Because when the time comes and God opens the door to your blessing, you will not only be ready to receive it, you will be strong enough to carry it. Trials are not meant to destroy us, but to refine us. When gold is purified, it must go through intense fire to remove the impurities. When a diamond is formed, it undergoes extreme pressure. In the same way, when God allows trials in our lives, He is not punishing us, He is refining us. He is removing what is not needed, shaping our character and strengthening our faith. The process may be painful, but it is necessary for us to become who He has called us to be. Many people question why they face difficulties, especially when they are trying to walk in faith. They wonder why they experience setbacks, disappointments, and hardships. But if we look at Scripture, we see that trials were a part of the journey for every person God used in a mighty way. Abraham was tested in his faith when he was asked to sacrifice Isaac. Job faced immense suffering, losing everything he had. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years before entering the promised land. None of these trials were meaningless. They all served a purpose in God's plan. Trials reveal what is truly in our hearts. When everything is going well, it is easy to have faith. But when difficulties arise, our true trust in God is tested. Do we believe he is still good when we don't see the answer? Do we trust his timing when doors remain closed? Faith that is not tested cannot be trusted. It is in the fire of trials that our faith becomes genuine, strong, and unshakable. Difficulties also teach us humility and dependence on God. When life is easy, we often rely on our own strength, but trials remind us that we need him. They bring us to a place of surrender, where we recognize that apart from him, we can do nothing. Paul, one of the greatest apostles, faced many hardships, beatings, imprisonment, shipwrecks, and rejection. Yet he declared that God's grace was sufficient and that in his weakness, God's strength was made perfect. Trials also develop perseverance and endurance. A tree that faces strong winds grows deeper roots. An athlete who trains under pressure becomes stronger. In the same way, when we go through struggles, we develop spiritual strength that allows us to stand firm in any season. If God removed every obstacle from our path, we would remain weak and unprepared for the challenges ahead. But he allows us to go through trials so that we may grow, mature, and be equipped for greater things. Sometimes what seems like a setback is actually a setup for something greater. Joseph's betrayal by his brothers and his years in prison seemed like suffering, but in reality they were steps leading to his destiny. What others meant for harm, God used for good. The trials we face today may not make sense now, but in time we will see how God used them to shape us, refine us, and prepare us for the blessings he has in store. Faith is always tested before a breakthrough. It is in the waiting, in the struggle, and in the uncertainty that faith is truly revealed. Anyone can believe when life is easy, when prayers are answered quickly, and when doors open without resistance. But the real test of faith comes when nothing seems to be changing, when the promise feels distant, and when God seems silent. It is in these moments that faith is refined, strengthened, and proven genuine. Abraham was given a promise that he would become the father of many nations, yet he and Sarah remained childless for years. The waiting must have tested his faith in ways we cannot imagine. Every passing year must have been a battle between doubt and trust. But the breakthrough came in God's perfect timing, and Isaac was born. If Abraham had given up in the waiting, he would have missed the fulfillment of God's promise. True faith does not waver even when circumstances seem impossible. The story of the Israelites shows another powerful example of faith being tested before a breakthrough. They were delivered from Egypt, but before they could enter the promised land, they faced a long journey filled with trials. They encountered the Red Sea before them and Pharaoh's army behind them. Fear gripped them, but God was teaching them to trust him. At the last moment, he parted the sea, making a way where there seemed to be none. But even after witnessing this miracle, their faith was tested again and again in the wilderness. Some remained faithful, while others allowed doubt to rob them of their destiny. Job's faith was tested in ways that few could endure. He lost his wealth, his health, and his family. Yet he refused to curse God. Even when he did not understand why he was suffering, he held on to his faith. In the end, God restored everything he had lost and blessed him even more than before. His story shows that faith is not about having all the answers. It is about trusting God even in the darkness. Jesus himself demonstrated the ultimate test of faith before his greatest breakthrough. In the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing the suffering that awaited him, he prayed in agony. He could have chosen to avoid the cross, but he surrendered to God's will. The breakthrough came in the resurrection, but it was preceded by the greatest test of faith. Many people give up right before their breakthrough because they cannot see what is ahead. The moment when faith is tested the most is often the moment just before God moves. The enemy tries to bring discouragement, doubt, and fear to make people quit too soon. But those who endure, who stand firm, and who keep believing despite the trials will see God's faithfulness revealed. Faith that is tested and proven strong leads to breakthroughs that are beyond imagination. The waiting may be long, the struggle may be hard, but the reward of unwavering faith is always worth it. The waiting season is never easy, but it is necessary for growth. When God places a dream, a calling, or a promise in our hearts, we often expect it to come to pass quickly. But more often than not, there is a waiting season between the promise and its fulfillment. This waiting is not wasted time. It is a time of preparation, transformation, and deepening faith. God uses the waiting season to refine us, to strengthen our character, and to ensure that we are ready for the blessings he has prepared. Growth does not happen overnight. Just as a seed must be planted in the soil, take root, and endure seasons before it becomes a tree, our spiritual and personal growth also takes time. If a tree were to grow too quickly without deep roots, it would not survive the storms. Likewise, if we receive blessings too soon without the maturity to handle them, they can become more of a burden than a gift. God allows us to wait so that we can grow strong enough to sustain what he wants to give us. Waiting teaches patience and dependence on God. In a world where everything moves fast, where instant gratification is expected, God's timing often feels slow. But he is not slow. He is intentional. He knows that if he gives us what we desire too soon, we may not appreciate it or we may misuse it. The waiting season teaches us to trust him, to rely on his wisdom rather than our own, and to develop endurance. The longer we wait, the deeper our trust in him becomes. Some of the greatest figures in the Bible went through long periods of waiting before stepping into their purpose. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading Israel. Joseph endured years of slavery and imprisonment before rising to power. David was anointed king but spent years on the run before taking the throne. None of these waiting seasons were wasted. They were a time of shaping and preparation. If God had placed them in their positions immediately, they would not have been ready. The waiting season was necessary for them to grow into the leaders they were meant to be. Waiting also reveals what is truly in our hearts. It tests our faith and our motives. Do we trust God, or are we only seeking his gifts? Do we have faith in his timing, or do we try to force things to happen on our own? The waiting season separates those who trust from those who waver. It deepens our relationship with God as we learn to seek him, not just for blessings, but for who he is. God never wastes a season of waiting. It is a time of hidden growth, of unseen preparation, of deepening faith. And when the time is right, the breakthrough will come, not a moment too soon or too late. Those who embrace the waiting season with faith and patience will see the reward of their perseverance. Many people seek blessings, asking God for success, prosperity, healing, or open doors. While God desires to bless his people, his blessings are not merely about fulfilling personal desires. True blessings align with his will and his purpose for our lives. If we only chase after what we want without seeking his guidance, we may miss the blessings he has prepared for us. What seems like a good opportunity in our eyes may not be what God has planned. His blessings are not based on our limited understanding, but on his perfect wisdom. God sees the full picture when we only see a part. We may pray for something, convinced that it will bring happiness or fulfillment, but God, in his wisdom, may withhold it because he knows it is not best for us. There are times when what we desire is actually a distraction or even a trap. If God were to give us everything we asked for, we might end up further from his purpose instead of closer to it. That is why true blessings come when we surrender our desires to him and trust that his will is greater than our own. Throughout Scripture, we see examples of people who had to align their desires with God's will before receiving his blessings. Hannah desperately wanted a child, and she prayed for years. But it was only when she dedicated her future child to God's service that he granted her request. Her blessing, Samuel, became a great prophet because it was aligned with God's purpose. Likewise, Jesus taught his disciples to pray, "Your will be done," showing that even our requests should be submitted to God's higher plan. Many people chase after financial success, thinking that wealth alone is a blessing. But if money comes without purpose or wisdom, it can lead to destruction instead of fulfillment. God's blessings are not just about material gain. They are about equipping us to serve him, to grow spiritually, and to bless others. When our hearts are aligned with his will, he provides what we need in the right way at the right time. There are times when God does not give us what we ask for because he has something better in store. A closed door is not rejection, it is redirect. We may pray for a specific job, a relationship, or an opportunity, and when it does not happen, we feel disappointed. But later we realize that God was protecting us from something that was not meant for us. When we learn to trust that his ways are higher than ours, we find peace even in unanswered prayers. True blessings bring us closer to God, not further away. They are not just about satisfying our earthly desires, but about fulfilling his divine plan. When we align our hearts with his will, we no longer chase after temporary things, but we walk in the assurance that every blessing he gives is for our good and his glory. God's timing is perfect, even when it does not align with our expectations. We often want things to happen immediately, but God works according to his divine schedule. When the time is right, he will release his blessings in ways that we cannot imagine. No delay is without purpose, and no waiting season is wasted. God knows exactly when to open doors, when to answer prayers, and when to bring breakthroughs. His blessings are never late, nor are they too early. Before God blesses you, he will prepare you. He will refine you, test your faith, and take you through seasons of waiting and growth. It may not always be easy, and at times you may wonder why the process is so difficult. But trust that he is shaping you for something greater. What feels like a delay is actually divine preparation. What seems like a trial is really a test of endurance. When the time is right, God will release his blessings upon you, not a moment too soon or too late. He knows exactly what you need and when you need it. So do not grow weary in the waiting, do not lose faith in the trials, and do not resist the process. Instead, surrender to his will, trust his timing, and remain faithful, because when God finally moves, his blessings will be far greater than anything you could have ever imagined. Stay strong, stay faithful, and be ready. Your breakthrough is on its way.